Today we're going to take a look at how the city of Tustin grew. Now when we do this, we actually need to separate it into two different areas of growth. One is we're going to take a look at how the size of the city grew. How did it add new areas of land and make the boundaries go out further? And then the second thing we're going to take a look at is the city's population, or the number of people, and how it increased over the years in Tustin's history. So first, let's talk about the size or the boundaries of Tustin. The size of our city remained mostly small for almost its first 80 years of existence. But starting in the 1950s, Tustin started something called annexation. Now that's kind of a big word. Annexation of small plots of land means when a local government legally adds land within the boundaries of the city. In the 1950s, Tustin began to annex small parts of surrounding land that were connected by the city's water system. Others were annexed to Tustin before other cities annexed them, like nearby Santa Ana. So there was a little bit of competition as to what land got added to which city's border. During this time, over 90 annexations took place and were added to the city of Tustin. Two really large ones happened later on in our history. For example, in the 1970s, the United States Marine Corps Air Base was annexed, and that was quite a large addition. And then later, more annexations were added to Tustin, including the sizable area of land that today you and I know as Tustin Ranch. Over the years, if you can believe it, Tustin's size grew from 434 acres to over 7,100 acres today. Quite a bit of growth. All right, so we've talked about how the size of Tustin grew over the years, but what caused more people to come to Tustin? Well, we're going to talk about the first early history of Tustin. From 1870, when Tustin City started, up into the year 1940, Tustin only grew to under 1,000 people. Here you see, in 1940, we only had 953 people. You can definitely say that Tustin remained a very small town for those first 70 years. Population growth started to take off in earnest, though, after World War II. You see, there were 5 military bases established in Orange County during World War II. And when World War II ended in 1945, Tustin, along with other cities in Orange County, welcomed back their returning soldiers who had been fighting in Europe, especially those who had been serving on our own bases here in Tustin. This was also true for soldiers coming back from the Korean War in the 1950s, and by early 1960s, we can see that the population of Tustin doubled from the 1950 number of 1,143 to 2006. But still, that's a relatively small town in terms of number of people. So now we take a look at these two decades, 1960, 1970. What do you notice? It grew 10 times its size. What caused that to happen? Well, to do that, we're going to take a look at some early maps of Tustin to see what happened. Well, something happened that made the population of not only Tustin, but all of Orange County explode between the 1940s and the 1960s. To understand this, we need to take a look at some aerial maps on this wall. Now, aerial maps are photos that are taken from the sky, from like a sky vehicle, like a Goodyear Blimp. And it takes kind of a bird's eye view of Tustin from the sky. And that's what you see right here. This first map is from 1946. Remember, we said that in that time that Tustin's population was only about 1,000 people. If you take a look, this area right here is where the homes were. There was a little area over here as well. And it's surrounded by these darker solid patches. Well, those darker solid patches are farmland and the orchards and orange groves that we know from that time period. You'll see that these farmlands surrounded the city of Tustin on all 4 sides. But about 10 years later, we're going to now go down to 1955. Now, about 10 years later, we're going to see a big change on this second map, which is the Tustin area in the year 1955. And you can see here is still the living area where all the homes were in Tustin. We still have quite a bit of agricultural land surrounding. But now you see this addition of this major freeway. This is the 5 or Santa Ana Freeway. And it was finished in Orange County in the later 50s, early 60s. And it connected the city of Los Angeles to San Diego County. It made travel much faster and connected almost all of Southern California together. On the map of Tustin, you can see there are many more buildings that were built in the area, and this is when the population doubled from 1,000 to about 2,000. Finally, this third aerial map comes from the year 1965, another 10 years later. And we now see a second major freeway being constructed right near Tustin through Orange County. This is the 55 freeway, or the Newport Freeway, and it connected the coastal cities of Orange County by the beach all the way to Riverside and San Bernardino County. Here is the city of Tustin, and as you can see, the area of homes is much, much, much more expansive. And you can see the areas of agricultural are much fewer down here at the bottom. Well, in addition to the freeways actually brought new businesses to Orange County, and with those new jobs, the families who worked for those companies followed and moved to Orange County, many to Tustin. In addition, there was something called a quick decline citrus disease, and it absolutely decimated or destroyed many of our local area orange groves. That, plus the rising value in land prices, induced the owners of the orchards to sell their land to builders and developers. As a result, the population of Tustin went from 2006 in the year 1960, and it multiplied tenfold in 1970 to 22,190. The orange groves gave way to the development of new homes, new schools, new shopping centers, and so on. All right, as we go back to our Tustin's population through the years, we take a look here at 1960 to 1970, we see that 10 times growth. And you can see with each subsequent decade, Tustin continued to grow by leaps and bounds. Until now, Tustin is well into the 80,000 in population. Take a look at this other very dramatic chart. The combination of easy new ways to travel to Orange County and the addition of the new land in our borders of Tustin shows this dramatic increase starting around the year 1960. And of course, here's where we are today. Wouldn't Columbus Tustin be so proud of what happened to his little old Tustin? Have you ever seen the two huge blimp hangars that are near the district in the Tustin Legacy? You may have seen them in today's car commercials, or maybe even in a movie or a TV show. There's quite a bit of history behind how these hangars were built and how they were used in Tustin's history. Standing 17 stories high, over 1,000 feet long, and 300 feet wide, the hangars were, and still are, two of the largest wooden structures ever built on this planet. It began with the historic and devastating surprise morning attack of Pearl Harbor, Hawaii on December 7th, 1941, which destroyed a large portion of the United States naval fleet. Although today we are very good friends with the country of Japan, back then this country's attack of Pearl Harbor caused the United States to enter World War II, and we were on opposite sides as enemies back then. Fearing that Japan might venture further and attack our west coast of the mainland, Orange County was chosen by the government as an area to house and maintain large blimps intended to patrol the Pacific coast from San Diego all the way to Santa Barbara, searching for enemy Japanese submarines. As a result, on April 1st, 1942, the Navy broke ground to build two nearly identical blimp hangars made of spruce wood. They didn't use steel, as they were saving that material to build U.S. ships. If you come into the museum, you will see this screen that is showing the history of the air station. As you can see, each hangar would hold these large blimps. The naval station was commissioned on October 1st, 1942, and operations began with just a single Navy blimp. By the end of 1942, the station had a full crew of 12 blimps, 6 for each hangar. At this time, the land where the hangars were built actually belonged to Irvine Ranch. The land was added into Tustin much later through annexation. Now, we're going to take a minute and see something else that you can see in the museum when you come to visit. We're going to take a look at a model of the blimp hangar. Over here, you can see a scaled-down model of one of our blimp hangars. It's done in a cutout form, so you can actually see the blimps and how they were stationed inside the hangar. This Naval Air Station was sometimes called Lighter Than Air Station, or LTA, because the helium that filled inside the balloons was actually lighter than our atmosphere outside. And you can see that here are only housed 3 blimp hangars, but we know that we could actually fit 6 inside of each one. The hangars and blimps were kept in full use until the end of World War II, which took place in September of 1945. In 1946, the station was placed on reduced operation status due to World War II coming to an end, and a year later it was decommissioned by the U.S. Navy and actually placed on the inactive list. But just 4 years later, when the Korean War began, the station was recommissioned as the Marine Corps Air Facility. And in 1969, the name was changed to add the word helicopter. The next year, the city of Tustin formally annexed the Marine Corps base into the city of Tustin. During the Vietnam War, the base was a center for ongoing testing of radar installations, which were tested and shipped to South Vietnam. It was also a training facility for helicopter pilots. The base continued to serve as a major facility for Marine helicopter training and operations during the Vietnam War, Operation Desert Shield, and Desert Storm. By the early 1990s, the MCAS Tustin was a major center for Marine Corps helicopter aviation and radar on the Pacific coast. Its main purpose was to provide support services for the 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing and for other units utilizing the base. About 4,500 residents once lived on the base, and the base employed nearly 5,000 military personnel and civilians. Then in 1999, the MCAS Tustin was officially closed. 57 years after the base and its historic hangars arose from the fields of Orange County. Since the closure of MCAS Tustin, the city of Tustin was given the land around the base, now known as Tustin Legacy. You've probably seen many homes being built on the former base land, and of course, a major shopping center, the District, has been built upon this land. Both of the hangars, though, are still owned by the Department of Navy. At some time in the future, the Navy may give ownership of the hangars to the city of Tustin and the county of Orange. But for now, when you drive your family by them, just know you are looking at a huge piece of Tustin history and marvel at their incredible size, their unique use, and their service to our country over the years. Now, if you'd like to go on the City of Tustin's website, you can type in this address right here and watch a 25-minute video called Tustin Hangars, the Titans of History, and you can get even more history about these magnificent structures. The address is www.tustinca.org/765/Tustin-Hangars. I hope you enjoyed this look at a very important part of Tustin's history.
In this video, we're going to learn a little bit about the very beginning of Tustin's police department. In the very beginning, in the early years of Tustin, it was a quiet little community. Everyone felt very safe, they knew everyone. It was a nice community to live in. They even felt so comfortable that they would leave their front doors unlocked all day and all night. In the early 1900s, many of the Tustin area orchard owners realized that people were pilfering or stealing fruit from their orchards, especially from the trees right along the roads. So they decided to fight the crime themselves by organizing the Tustin Protective Association in 1907. They posted official warning signs in front of every orchard and the groves. They appointed a night watchman who was then made a deputy by the Santa Ana Police Department and the Sheriff Theo Lacey. They decided also just to keep the name of the night watchman secret, so no one knew who was watching them. In 1924, there was a daring bank robbery at the Tustin Bank. There's a picture of it right there, big brick building on the corner. It became big news in the area. 2 armed bandits forced banker Charles Vance and his assistant at the Tustin Bank to open the vault of the bank. They got away with almost $3,500. That was a lot of money in those days. That's the equivalent amount today. It would be over $50,000. Enough money to buy your own self-driving electric Tesla today. After that, the bank decided to buy a new large safe for better protection. Tustin residents were becoming concerned about both fire and police protection. Also, the city of Santa Ana was trying to annex Tustin, which means that they wanted Tustin to become part of their city of Santa Ana. But most of the residents in Tustin wanted to remain a small, quiet little community that they'd always been. They didn't want to join the big city of Santa Ana. Finally, in 1927, the residents of Tustin voted to incorporate, which means to become their own official city. They created a city council, with Barney Crawford becoming Tustin's first mayor. By the end of the year, they also created the first official police department and fire department. This is a portrait of John Stanton, who had been a police officer in Huntington Beach, but was then hired as the chief of police and the only officer in Tustin in January of 1928. He had no official headquarters or office, and instead had to handle all the calls and the official police business from his home. He also had to use his own car as the police patrol car. Here he is standing next to his very own car, our Tustin police car, with Charles Logan, who was the first police commissioner. In this picture of John Stanton, he is standing beside his next car, and you can see how tall he is. John Stanton was fondly called Big John because he seemed to be 7 feet tall to all the kids in town. He was actually 6'5", which is very tall. It's said that he never gave a ticket, but violators got a lecture from him they never forgot. He was the only police officer in Tustin for many years and served the city of Tustin for a total of 14 years until 1942. Now, Big John usually parked his car next to the drugstore downtown Tustin on the corner of Main and D Streets. He was ready to chase any motorist that was speeding down his highway or failing to stop at that intersection. Now remember, at that time, D Street was part of State Highway 101 that connected Los Angeles all the way down to San Diego. So Big John had lots of territory and traffic to monitor, especially on weekends. Big John also became somewhat of a legend during the 1940s. The Marines that were stationed out at El Toro Marine Base enjoyed trying to outsmart him. One story tells how a couple of Marines distracted Big John while several others tied the rear bumper of his car to a tree. And then when he tried to chase a speeding motorist going down the street, his car couldn't even move. They all had a good laugh. In 1942, the City Council finally hired a second police officer who was a night patrolman to help Big John out. And in 1948, the city hired a third officer finally as well. The Tustin Police Department has grown from only one officer, Big John Stanton, to nearly over 100 sworn police officers, plus 55 civilian employees today. The motto of our Tustin Police Department is to improve the quality of life for those who visit, live, and work in the city of Tustin. All right, in this video, we're going to learn a little bit about the history of the Tustin Fire Department. Now, can you imagine what it would be like if your house caught on fire and you didn't have a fire department to come help you put out the fire? Well, that's exactly what it was like in early Tustin. When Tustin first became a community in the late 1800s, the main material available to build homes and businesses was wood. Now, lumber was brought down from the local mountains, or it may have even been shipped from up in Northern California by ship and landed in Newport Beach, taken off the ships and brought into the little communities to build their buildings. Also, in those homes and businesses that were built of wood, meals were cooked on wood-burning stoves. Wood-burning fireplaces provided the heat. And oil lamps, kerosene lamps, and lanterns provided the light. All of those needed fire. In other words, there was constantly a danger of the wooden buildings catching on fire. There was no official fire department like we have today. Everyone had a fire bucket they kept next to their front door, just in case they needed it for a fire. If a house or building caught on fire, neighbors would then grab their bucket and run to help put out the fire, or at least toss their buckets out into the street so someone else could use it. These volunteer neighbors could then form a line, fill the buckets with water, and then pass them down the line, like in this picture, to be dumped on the fire. This was called a fire bucket brigade. Of course, you always kept your name and address on your bucket so that you could get it back after the fire. Finally, in 1915, a group of volunteers organized and ordered their very first fire extinguisher. It was a two-wheel cart called a chemical tank, just like this one you're looking at. It was pulled to the fire by either two men or by a horse. A canister inside the lid held chemicals, and the tank held the water. When they reached the fire, the tank was tipped upside down, which spilled the chemicals into the water in the tank. This created a reaction of gas, which then forced the water through the hose. In 1917, Sam Tustin, Columbus Tustin's son, donated his car, a 1912 Buick touring car, to the volunteer fire department. This is a photo of what his car looked like. It was then sent to Los Angeles to be converted into Tustin's first fire truck. This is what it looks like after the conversion was finally completed around 1924. This is Tustin's very first fire truck, which is now parked in the middle of the Tustin Museum. Let's take a closer look at it. The fire truck has two small tanks on the back that basically work the same as the two-wheel cart. The tanks are filled with water, and then a chemical is dropped into the little glass receptacle near the top. The tank is rotated to allow the chemical to mix with the water. This gas reaction then forces the water out of the hose. Well, the advantage to the fire truck is that one tank could be used at a time and then being recharged while the second tank was being used. This process would then be repeated for as long as they needed to continue fighting the fire. And hat were made of leather because they were more fireproof and stronger. That's all I'm saying. It's very short. And then I'm going down to this one.
Why don't I zoom in
Okay, go for it.
on that one
Okay,
and the hat?
okay,
So
perfect. Yeah.
whenever you're ready,
Okay.
are you going to pull the hat out so they can see it a little bit?
Should I? I mean, I can,
Just back down, just kind of rotate it a little.
this way?
You're too
Wait,
high up. You got to go back down towards the middle.
I'm not sure what, because it's hooked on here. I can't move it.
Well, we could unhook it, but let's just let it.
Here. It's got a toggle thingy on it here.
Yeah,
Here. So I can just hold it. Okay. Of course, they had buckets to use also. These two buckets and the fireman hat were made out of leather because they were more fireproof and stronger than other materials. This fire bucket is sitting upside down because it has a rounded bottom. Can you guess why? Well, since buckets were a very handy and important object to have around a home or farm, the bottom was purposely pounded out on this so that no one would borrow the bucket for another purpose, and it would always remain available for use for the fire. This hand crank siren was used to call all the volunteer community members to come help out put out the fire. When everyone heard the siren, they would come out to see where the fire was and then run to help put it out. But just like today, it would also warn everyone to get out of the way of the fire truck so it could quickly get to the fire. With the use of the fire truck now, an official volunteer fire department was organized around 1924. A siren was purchased in 1927 and mounted on top of the bank building on the corner of Main and D Streets. When the siren was sounded, all the volunteer firemen had to stop whatever they might be doing, at home or at work, and quickly get to the fire truck, which was at that time stored in the Tustin garage at the corner of D and 6th Streets. That's where the Black Marlin restaurant is today. A second volunteer fire department was finally organized in 1948 to provide fire protection to many of the new homes that were being built in the eastern part of Tustin. The Red Hill Volunteer Fire Department was actually a cinder block building that was built about where Ruby's restaurant is today, near the corner of Irvine Boulevard and Newport Avenue. And the siren on the wall is an example of the siren that they would ring. Even though you could hear the siren for a long distance, volunteers had to live close to this building. They not only had to hear the siren when it sounded, but they also had to quickly get to the fire department to jump on the fire truck before it took off for the fire. Through the years, new trucks, pumps, and other firefighting equipment was purchased to meet the needs of a growing community. This is a picture of the last group of Tustin Fire Police, organized by the Tustin City, because finally in 1978 the responsibility for fire protection in Tustin, as well as many of the other emergencies, was transferred to the Orange County Fire Department. Today we have 3 state-of-the-art fire stations throughout the city of Tustin, as well as several in nearby areas. We continue to be thankful for our brave firefighters and their service to the community of Tustin.